Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a great time at the first Milken Institute Asia Summit. As we launch into our discussion today, I'd like to introduce you to a training program that the Milken Institute Center for Financial Markets launched in 2015, together with the International Finance Corporation, a member of the World Bank Group. And the idea really came from Stacey Worden, who's the Executive Director of the Center for Financial Markets. Stacey, if you could please stand up. This program brings a select group of 20 mid-career professionals from finance ministries and central banks across emerging markets to Washington, D.C. for an unforgettable training experience. This is a stepping stone to a career advancement and more impactful work to many of them, in particular, the women. When they return to their home country government roles, they are better positioned to spearhead capital markets development, making sure that the financial sector generates jobs and growth. The second class of IFC Milken Institute Fellows started last month. We're proud to have expanded to more Asian countries and have 43% of women amongst our alumni. We hope to have a majority of women in years to come who will stay in touch via our alumni network and become the next financial leaders in their own countries. Please enjoy a short video to learn more about the program and how you can get involved.
In the fall of 2016, 18 mid-career individuals gathered in Washington, D.C. to begin a collective journey. They had been nominated by governments across a range of developing countries to address an ambitious challenge.
The moment we have many players in our market and the moment it becomes deep, then the better for us.
If we're really going to create jobs and opportunities, we had to create a large group, both for Africa and Southern Asia, of financial experts, those that could compete with the leading financial leaders around the world to bring capital to their countries, but to deploy it with millions of entrepreneurs to create tens of millions of jobs.
It has been quite a journey, and the sort of exposure and the kind of people that we've met, I think it's something that in your ordinary course of life you would not imagine.
I think it's just been an amazing experience. I don't think I would trade it for the world.
The Capital Markets Program is a partnership between the International Finance Corporation and the Milken Institute, as well as the George Washington University School of Business. And the idea of the program is to take a group of young professionals across developing countries and give them the practical skills as well as the knowledge and the experience in private sector firms that they need in order to be more impactful policymakers.
Access to finance is really the key. So for us to build a functioning capital market, we really have to bring capacity to bring the regulators, government officials to a level that they understand and they feel comfortable and they can push for capital market development.
Now I 100% convinced that finance is the power of everything, and it is very crucial to change the economic outlook of my country.
The idea is that the up-and-coming superstars do a semesters of work on core capital markets topics and then do an internship. Our dream is that over time, 10 years from now, when we're talking to you about this, we've got a cohort of a couple of hundred policymakers that know each other, that have been brought up together.
And once you have a cadre of champions of capital market, we will have an accelerated trajectory in providing finance to private sector.
I want to transfer the knowledge I was able to receive when I was here for these 10 months. You get this exposure and you go back, transfer that knowledge to my colleagues.
From a focus on Africa for its first year, the program is expanding. We aim to create a global network.
And I would encourage more of my friends and colleagues to take part of this exciting journey.
There's many ways in which an institution can get involved. One is by participating in our weekly speaker series. One is by taking an intern, hosting one or more interns in the second half of the program. And then the third, and I think all of these go hand in hand, is to help sponsor students' participation in the program.
We're delighted to be welcoming our second class of IFC Milken Institute Fellows this year. The program and its alumni network are only set to grow further, so contact the Milken Institute to get involved.
Yeah, congratulations, Dessie. And now, please welcome on stage our next panel, Unlocking Potential, Fueling Economic Empowerment.
Thank you all. I am delighted to be here. The good thing about being a journalist is you get to take part in these incredible events at the Milken Institute. My profession is one which has a very healthy representation of women at the top, which I have always felt is because women are, journalism is a very low-paying profession, sadly. The topic of this panel is economic empowerment. And I think we all agree that the way to economic empowerment is through education. And all my panelists today are very, very much concerned with education. And it is an honor to be chairing this panel, which is so important. I spent most of my career in Asia, and I spend a lot of time in remote places, both in China and India. And one of the things you realize when you are in these remote places is how much of a problem gender imbalance is. And when there are fewer women, what tends to happen isn't that women are more treasured, but rather they become a commodity that you need to take hold of at a very young age, creating a cycle that is the opposite of a virtuous cycle. Betelhem is such a role model for me. And as I thought about this panel, I wanted to depart first from some of the questions that we've been assigned to, because I think the definition of education is really changing in the world today. And I was talking to David Siegel, who I'm sure some of you know, who chairs 2 Sigma. And he says, if people aren't educated in technology, in understanding computers and AI, the world will be more and more of a black box with all the unfortunate consequences that arises. So I wanted to talk to you first as such an inspiration for us, because you decided early on, growing up in Ethiopia, that education has to mean all this leading edge stuff. How did you come across that? Tell us your story.
First of all, I'm very honored to be here. As she said, my name is Betelhem Dessie, and I'm from Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. So when I first started out, I was born and raised in Harar, which is a small town in Ethiopia. So I started coding when I was 10. So I started coding because my father has this little shop in which he sold electronics, and then we had computers. So people would come and buy computers. So we also had a computer in which people can just come and edit their videos and just go. So it was my 9th birthday, and I asked my father to give me money for my birthday, and he said, no, I couldn't give it to you today. So I decided maybe I'll just work and get the money and then celebrate my birthday. So I decided to video edit, copy some music to people's iPods and stuff, and then I got money to celebrate my birthday. So then I said, if this can generate money for me, and it's also a new and an exciting thing I could do, so why not go on it further? So I started getting internet access, and also people came and gave me different books. So I started to learn coding. So from then on, I started teaching other kids of basic computer education. So our late Prime Minister got to know me, and then I came to the capital city of Ethiopia, which is Addis Ababa, and then I really started working with different government organization and also the private sector. So since then, I've worked with different clients on web, on mobile application development, etc. So currently, I'm now working with one of the pioneer AI and robotics company, not only in Ethiopia, but in Africa, which is called iCog-Labs, in order to introduce this new concept of robotics and coding to Ethiopia and also to the African countries. So currently I'm working on a project called Anyone Can Code, which is teaching girls and also boys how to code, and also another initiative, which is iCog Makers, to introduce this same concept to universities in African countries.
Before I go on to Leili, I'm just going to ask you one more question. And that is, today, do you think there should be any distinction between the education girls receive and boys receive?
No, not really, because if given the opportunity, both boys and girls can equally be anyone they want to be. So I guess because I've seen girls excel more in education in high schools and also primary education, but because of the access they're not given, they couldn't be what they want to be when they go to higher institutions. So if given the same opportunity, they can be at the same level as males are.
Thank you. Leili, I'm going to turn to you now and ask you, growing up in Iran, going to Harvard, you have lived the dream of so many people all over the world. Talk about what you learned in each, and was the transition from one to the other world? How difficult was it for you? Is it becoming less difficult? And what are you doing now with your passion for education?
Thank you. I think it's very simple. When you think about Middle East, you only think about men. And the men also only talk about men. So it's very obvious how things are rolled out for a woman who has a dream. So I was part of the privileged ones to have the force of my parents to get my education in the US. But from then on,
how difficult was that?
It was difficult because my grandfather was not agreeing to that, and he wanted to take part of those decisions. And my parents really just pushed me out, and I was probably one of the first in my generation to actually be allowed to do such a thing and be bold. But from then on, I was on my own. I had to find my way, where in the US I want to get educated, how do I get there, who do I know, how to do it. Our education system in Iran is very high, so they train you to be very high performing. So I think that was to my benefit over in the US. And I worked my way up, and I then did most of my career in the Middle East, trying to transform the mentality of men reporting to women. It was challenging, but it's what I wanted to do. And at one point, I had about 100 men reporting to me in the Arab world, which was challenging. But I thought, if I can reach that impossible, then I can see what it takes to be a woman at that level going higher, and then I can enable and provide access for those who deserve to be in that situation and want to be. I think that is a very important ingredient. So then when I started getting into impact investments with Mayet around the world, where we educate and empower women to take a part in one of the important luxury brands out of New York. When I started in the movie industry in New York, empowering women to take roles in the leading movies with very amazing women who are in this industry, I started thinking, how can I now get all that activity across the world that I'm involved in with whether it's profit or non-profit, how can I get it closer to Middle East, and how can I use all of that knowledge to empower economic empowerment of men and women in Iran. So
let me stop you there and ask you a question. I spend a lot of time in the Gulf, and when I go to the Gulf, or Saudi say, I often talk to men who say, I love for my sons to go to the West to be educated. But if my daughters go to the West to be educated, they will become a misfit at home. And I have friends in places like Kuwait who say, I can never get married because my husband wants me to sit home and wear the veil. And how can I do that after I've been educated in the States, after I'm running a portfolio of $1 billion? You know, one of the interesting questions that we're supposed to address is all about incentives. How do you create the incentives so a father and a husband are supportive rather than feeling threatened or concerned by empowering their daughters and wives?
I always think education is the key. And education doesn't mean you have to go to a very high-end university, you have to be a woman or a man. I think educating my own father or my own brother, or back at the time, my own grandfather, would have helped the progress of a lot of things much faster. So I believe it's not about empowering women. I think it's about empowering minds. And minds are gender equal. I think if you can shift and impact a mind into a right direction, whether it's a man or a woman, then it is much more powerful. And rather than trying to say it's a woman, so she has to take care of the society, you have to allow her, but you need to kind of join that, especially in my part of the world. In Iran, it would be impossible to find a woman who's sitting doing nothing. They like to develop themselves, they like to educate themselves. 60% of the graduates are women, 45% hold PhDs. So it is a very highly educated market, but the problem is lack of access. Access to the unknown of beyond the borders, which is what I'm trying to bridge. So I'm trying to fledge the whole potential that is hidden and fulfill them. So I don't want to focus on women. I've never only focused on women. I think the men who can empower talent are as effective as women who empower women. So I think it's about finding that talent, put it in the right path, and welcome anyone who wants to be the champion of changing the world.
Let me ask you one final question before I turn to you, Kamal. And that is this. We've seen a lot of American universities open satellite campuses in the Middle East. And in some ways, you have a wonderful Western education, but outside the classroom, you're still in this traditional environment. Yeah. How do you feel about those experiments?
It's horrible. It's, no matter, you can be a CEO of a $1 billion company, or you can lead investment company, or lead the philanthropy of your family, or your family office of a couple of billion turnover, and you are still a woman. You are still at the dinner table and the family table. The men sit on one side, the women on one side, and they don't. They're still not. They're not there yet, but they're getting fast there. Where a lot of women, I think, are pushing it, and there are some men who are very supportive. But I think culturally, traditionally, it is a lot influenced by history. And that a lot of older generations don't want to give it up yet. But I can tell you that the new generation is extremely motivated. They're extremely on the go, and they're trying to take the barriers down. And I can see it happening in front of my eyes, and I'm happy to be enabling some of them to do it even faster.
Thank you so much. Kamal, I want to turn to you now. Kamal, of course, is the founder of the Women's University in Bangladesh. Talk to us a little bit about the university, and then we'll get into more specific questions.
Great. Thank you, Henny. This is a university which is regional, based in Bangladesh, but drawing on women from across South, Southeast, and the Middle East regions.
And Afghanistan, by the way.
Afghanistan, right? Is the second largest source of our students. So I think what this university, which is about to celebrate its 10th anniversary, did is to say no part of any society has a monopoly on talent, and really shift the needle to focus on communities who are ordinarily bypassed by the system as not being worthy of a high quality education. So we focus principally on women who are first in their family to get to university, but who already exhibit certain qualities of leadership. They have courage, they're outraged at injustice, and they have a keen sense of empathy. So that's the experiment we have been doing for the last 10 years, bringing in women who are factory workers in the garments factories of Bangladesh, the Hazara ethnic minority community in Afghanistan, remote corners of Cambodia, Syrian refugees, of course. And what we see is an extraordinary transformation. Women, academically, they succeed. We have graduates who have gone on to PhD programs at Stanford, at Columbia, at Brandeis, all over the world. But they also take on challenges that make a difference within their own communities. The chief of staff to the First Lady of Afghanistan, for example, already is one of our graduates. And so the examples go on.
And these women coming from traditional societies, is there much opposition from their families? Have they had to fight to get there? Or generally, are these the ones who are fortunate enough to have been born in relatively more enlightened circumstances, and so their families support them?
I mean, it varies. I think at the end of the day, unless the families support them, they're not able to make the journey. Ordinarily, it's not just the immediate family who has to support you, it's really your extended family and the community at large. Almost any voice within that can override the proposition of a young woman going to a foreign country for education. But, none of these societies are static. Things are changing. We have so many applications from Afghanistan, for example. We could fill the whole university with women from Afghanistan because even that society is changing daily. The opportunities that wouldn't have been afforded 10 years ago are now being prized.
One of the reasons that I love the panelists I have here today is they all have a sense of urgency. And one of the points that you made to me was how critical it is to reach girls when they're still in primary school, because the danger isn't that they'll drop out when they're 10 years old, but when they're in that period after primary school, to make sure their families continue to be supportive of them so they get to the point where they can actually go to university. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes, I think what we find in our work with young girls and women is the biggest barrier is really an aspirational barrier. If you're a 10, 11-year-old girl, nobody tells you that you can become anything. And in fact, in most cases, it's just the contrary. Girls are over and over again told that they can't be anything. So you almost come to believe it unless there are organized efforts which propel them to think otherwise. So I think, and this becomes most crucial in the transition from primary to secondary education. For a variety of factors having to deal with the age of the person, often the distance to the secondary school is too far, enormous pressures for the girls to drop out at that stage. So that's where I think the crucial work takes place in ensuring a girl transits into secondary school. And without that, of course, the prospect of higher education becomes completely elusive.
One of the interesting things is, and John will get to this later, is sometimes the solutions are not that complicated. So Bihar in India is one of the poorest states in India, but the chief minister, Nitish Kumar, made it his priority to give every girl a bicycle. And so you can get to school. It's just that simple thing, right? John, I'm going to turn to you now. Explain to us a bit about Room to Read, and then we'll talk in a more granular way.
Well, I'm going to take issue with that. I don't think the solution is to give every girl a bicycle. I think it's actually a bit more complicated than that. And sometimes I have a problem that we think that there's some silver bullet solution. You've got to surround these young women with everything they need to succeed in life. And that isn't just a bicycle. It's having strong social workers who are encouraging them, as Kamal said, telling them they can be anything they want. It's working with them to learn financial planning skills, career planning skills, giving them the sight that they can go to university, tertiary, full-time employment. So I don't think it's ever as simple as just throwing one thing at women and saying, here's the solution. So I respectfully just wanted to add that. The panel, is really the fueling economic empowerment is the thing we've been asked to talk about. And I would posit that one of the best ways to empower women and men, but we're Women's Summit here, so let's talk about empowering women, is very, very clear. It's been proven over and over again by economists, by human history, by case studies of countries like Singapore and Hong Kong that have universalized access to education for both the boy child and the girl child. And that's education, getting every single young woman throughout the developing world and the developed world, but getting them through school, through secondary school, and ideally into AUW and other universities. The problem with it is that it's not an easy solution. It takes 6, 7, 8, 9 years. And we're in a world that lives for the quick fix. Let's throw something at the problem and just hope it works. What our experience has been, though, is that if you can get young women through secondary school, it gives them the economic empowerment they would have never otherwise had. We know, and I'm going to tell statistics that many of you already know, that every year that a woman gets educated beyond the norm in her society, her eventual income increases by 15 to 20%. So give that girl who's going to drop out in 5th grade, get her through 12th grade, her earnings power is going to double or triple. We know, referenced earlier, that when women earn a marginal dollar, they spend 90% of it on their family. Food, clothing, shelter, medicine, education. No offense to the men of my gender, when we earn a marginal dollar, we don't tend to spend it in as enlightened a way as women tend to spend it. Women who are educated get married later, they have fewer children, they take less guff from society because they're self-confident. And so I guess I look at it and think this is the easiest, not easiest, but the smartest solution in the world. Now, doing that must be expensive, right? Not at all. Developing world, the average cost is $300 per girl per year to keep a girl in a scholarship program long-term and give her everything she needs to succeed. So if you're looking at getting a 5th grader through 12th grade, you're looking at a marginal cost of $1,800 total, full stop. Of course, the economy then grows as a result of it. But we're just simply not doing enough of it. I don't know why. It frustrates me. But let me just give you, I have this thing like fun facts about the global education gap, except that they're actually not fun, unfortunately, but they are facts. 770 million people in the world today are illiterate. 98% of them are in the world's 50 poorest countries. 2/3 of those who are illiterate are girls and women. 150 million kids and young people woke up this morning and didn't go to school. 2/3 of them are girls and women. So if we really want to look at how do we economically empower the next generation of women, we've got to admit to ourselves that throwing technology at the solution is not it. That's putting the cart before the horse, because if a young woman cannot read or write, what chance does she have? So I'm a zealot, a happy happy warrior. I'm very, very proud of the support of many people in this room and companies in this room. This year, Room to Read will mark a significant milestone. We have 2 of them this year. Number 1, we will have our 50,000th young woman enrolled in our long-term girls education program. And number 2, we will open our 20,000th library. We actually got to 20,000 libraries faster than Howard Schultz got to 20,000 Starbucks locations, which is important to us. So anyway, long story short, I think if you want to look at economic empowerment, education long-term is a solution, but for God's sake, let's do more of that, because there's over 100 million of your sisters and my sisters out there who aren't going to school, and if they remain poor and unempowered, we can't really act surprised about it.
John, tell us how your business model evolved. You know, your point about how the whole environment has to be supportive. Talk to us how you came up with the model of the collaborative, which is so key to your success, I think.
Well, so I quit Microsoft to start Room to Read, and to be clear, when I left Microsoft, I didn't make enough money to start a foundation. That's the easiest way to be a philanthropist. You have a foundation, everyone has to talk to you. I made enough money at Microsoft to start a cash-strapped, little-known NGO called Room to Read in 2000. And I very early on said, I really want to partner with the power of the capitalists of the world. A lot of NGOs are like anti-capitalist, bomb-throwing. You know, they want to assign blame to everything. What we said is let's take the power of capitalism and then tie it to the power to do good for the world. So there's many institutions in this room, from Citibank to UBS to Credit Suisse to Goldman Sachs, who've been very, very, very supportive. And we basically went to the business leaders of the world to say, you can do more good through a well-run, fleet of feet, data-driven NGO like ours than you can by just going out and implementing your own programs. We're scalable, we have the data to prove it, we are very data-obsessed geeks. Most of our leadership team are what I call corporate refugees. We've cut our teeth at the Microsofts and the Goldmans and the Unilevers of the world, but then went on to an encore career. And what we try to do is just really tie the power of capitalism. So I'll give you a fun example of this very quickly, and then I'll stop talking. There's a skincare company called Tatcha, T-A-T-C-H-A, co-funded by Vicky Tsai and Brad Murray, both of whom are HBS classmates. Vicky was at Starbucks, saw me speak there 10 years ago, and literally said, I'm gonna go do something big through Room to Read one day for girls' education. When they started Tatcha, they started a program called Beautiful Faces, Beautiful Futures. And the idea behind it is that and they just baked it into the DNA of the business model from the very, very early days, so nobody could ever tell them they couldn't do it. The idea is every time they sell an SKU, they donate $1 to Room to Read, which represents one girl going to school for one day. Sounds simple, sounds small, right? First year, 150,000 Girl Day sponsored. Second year, 350,000 Girl Day sponsored. On International Women's Day this May, they announced, and they got a huge amount of publicity for it, they had funded 1 million Girl Days of education. Huge. That's one company and the power of one company. Vicky tells me, this is why I get out of bed in the morning. She's like, my car is being held together by duct tape, but I would rather give money to girls' education because that's the right thing to do. She also took her daughter at age 6 to Cambodia to meet some of the girls in the program. And when they came back, her daughter very proudly brought Mr. Piggy, her very cleverly named piggy bank, to the dinner table and said, Mom, Dad, everything we put into Mr. Piggy from now on is going to go to those girls in Cambodia to help them. So it's cool because it's the power of capitalism, the power of entrepreneurship, but it's also making philanthropy and making girls' education a family sport.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you one other question. And that is, how did you come up with the requirement that the communities that you're in have to be supportive? They're signing on, you know, the libraries, the teachers, that kind of thing.
Well, what happened is when we were building the first school in Nepal, and I wanted to actually fund it myself and do it in honor of my parents. Probably like many of you, I'm the product of an educated father, but I'm also the product of an educated mother. And that means I won the lottery of life, right? Like many of you, it's like you have educated parents, you're born lucky. So my co-founder, Dinesh Shrestha in Nepal, told me what it was going to cost to build the first school. And I said, great, I'll wire you that amount of money. And he said, no, wire me half. Wire me half the money. I'll find the other half through community labor. I'll find the other half through the Village Development Committee, the District Development Committee. He said, I'll raise the other half through the local resources. And his whole thing was, he said, Nepal, he goes, I resent people coming in from outside Nepal and throwing aid at us. I resent people coming in and dumping off surplus clothing. He's not a huge fan of the Tom Shoes model of give shoes out to poor children and that somehow solves poverty. That really, in his opinion, created this dynamic where you treat the developing world as passive aid recipients. Dinesh said, I will get the community to build the school, dig the foundation, carry the cement from the roadside up. I'll get the government to provide the teachers, and through the Department of Education, pay their ongoing salary. We've now opened or built 2,500 schools and opened 20,000 libraries. We have never paid $1 of a teacher's salary or a librarian's salary because we require the Ministry of Education to do that because we don't want to do our work unless the local community and the Ministry of Education value it. It's not only pragmatic, it also makes the work more sustainable, but also most importantly, money is going to always be limited, so it means we can stretch our dollars that much further.
Thank you, that's great. I'm coming back to you, Leili, because, you know, when you talk to John, you have a sense of how it's all one, really, and you cannot just distinguish doing good as nothing to do with the private sector or making money. You've done so many things, and you can't put neat distinctions in all the things you've done. And it's a spectrum, and some things are more profitable and some things are less profitable. What gives you the most satisfaction of all your amazing initiatives, whether in the philanthropy sector or private sector and profit making, where women are, you actively look for women as role models, for example, in your filmmaking?
I can tell you my recent experience for the past year has given me an enormous amount of satisfaction, and that has been, in Iran, I looked at girls who were educated, who were me, and I created businesses to give, and men and women, to give them the chance to exercise the talents that they have and connect them to the outside world so they can get even more educated on how to bring their talent to the standards of the international world. But on the other side, then I focused on men and women who are far, far away from even villages. They're nomads. They pick apples for a living. They have never seen factories. They didn't know that there's such a thing called apple vinegar. Or men who have never seen potato chips in making. And so what we did is I decided that although we have a lot of training and educational facilities, but I decided that I would activate unused spaces in villages, towns, and nowhere lands. And I create education systems within there so that I rent those spaces so they make money, but then also create a education facility close to these people who have nothing. And I have an incentive program where if they speak 3 languages fluently, they are promised a job within the companies. And these are English, French, and then they can choose between Arabic, Chinese, and Japanese. And we have people who are feeding their herd of sheep and cows in the mountains, but they have an audio system in their head, and they are learning. And we have nomads who are traveling around the country with their tents on their shoulders. And as you know, seasonally, they change their place. We have rented one of their tents, and we didn't have to rent it, but we did it on purpose. And we have English or language teachers who come to the tents, and the enormous amount of men and women, more women, who are attending these classes twice a week, and they speak better English than me, and they have never seen a city, is just unbelievable. And then we have once a year a training facility for entrepreneurship. We actually teach them mini MBAs using the facilities we have and the experts in the industry throughout the country. We take them to see factories, and they have now set up a lot of mini businesses. They have set up apple vinegar business. They're actually selling it through cities. They have different likes of businesses. Inside homes, we have activated women to make cleaning materials, and they sell it, and they actually get finance from us, and they hire other women in the homes to make for them, to supply for them. We have taken some students out to see a chips factory, and they had to write a diary when they come home, and one of them had written that he had to wipe his tears with this bus curtain because he never knew that the potatoes that they pick goes through that process, and that actually becomes the chips. So we are creating a lot of MBA entrepreneurship training and courses throughout the year. We are tapping, as much as I'm tapping into the educated, talented world of women and men who have university degrees, I have promised myself that equally I want to tap into the community who never had or never thought they could have that exposure, and they're doing amazing jobs. They're really talented.
That's so wonderful. I'm going to ask you one final question, Kamal, and then one final question for you, Betelhem. And meanwhile, please think of your questions in the audience, because I want to make sure that this wonderful panel has time to respond to your questions and not just mine. You know, I think one of the wonderful things is the balance here between practical education and a more general schooling. How do you see the balance? And is your definition of education evolving over time? And if so, how?
I think all education ultimately has to be practical. They have to be responsive to both the individual and societal needs. Now, having said that, I think there are some deep misconceptions of what constitutes practical. I'll give you our own example. This is a university that serves largely first-generation university entrants. Ordinarily, the temptation is to say, but shouldn't they be in a vocational school? Because the vocational school is deemed to be the practical approach to life for poor people. Now, there is a huge distinction between what is considered to be practical for poor people and that for those with more resources. Our view is really the determination ought to be a function of talent. Now, a lot of the people we recruit are on the edges of society. And in some ways, they have more resilience, they have more capacity, if you will, than ordinarily would be the case. So we have tapped into these enormous pool of talent. And and what we're discovering is they thrive in a liberal arts and science community. They are the next generation of leaders. And that education that fosters critical learning, fosters a continuous process of learning, becomes very practical. All of our graduates, albeit we're a small university, easily find jobs, and find jobs that are fulfilling, that they can respond to over time. But the point I also want to make is, I think this is a huge tragedy in the development thinking, that most of our focus is on the cheapest programs. You want to support women who don't have access to the formal banking sector, you said they ought to go to microfinance. You have poor children who cannot go to school, so you think of non-formal education. I'm not devaluing them, but I'm saying there is a prejudicial bias built in that disables thinking of investments that are appropriate for the most talented among us.
I think that is such a valid point. I'm going to turn to you, and then I expect all of you in the audience to take over from me. And that is, there has been concern in the developed world that increasing technology has made income equality much worse rather than better. I look at you and your story, and it gives me hope that in emerging markets, technology will empower more and more, and the problem of income inequality and these kinds of disparities will become less. How do you see this?
Actually, I'm going to start with I'm working, as I said, in a place called iCog-Labs, and what we do is we develop software, AI, and robotics, and some of the features you see in the next robot, Sophia, are also developed in, some of the features are developed in iCog. So the thing is, the income, well, I can put it as this, there are a lot of people working on these projects, and they had the computer and the internet, so that they learned. We bring different students from higher education institutes, which are the universities, and we have a program which is an internship, and then they intern and they learn how to do these things, and then they can produce softwares that can be used all over the world. So what we're trying to do with all of our initiatives is that we give the same opportunity that's given to other people by giving them coding trainings and also access to the internet, in which they can develop their own knowledge on any field, so that they can work on anything they want. So focusing on the project, what we're doing currently is that we are trying to give access to students which are from age 8 to 16, so that they can know, because it's the 21st century technology and emerging technologies are increasing, and we have to leapfrog to those technologies instead of just trying to learn basic computer skills and also basic like Word, Microsoft Excel, and other things. So we have to leapfrog and to learn and to be equal with the other world. So we can't just go through the route we have been going for the past few years. So we're trying to teach those emerging technologies to both girls and boys. And we have been collaborating with like the US Embassy, different private sector institutions to give this access to both primary and secondary education and also to universities. We have thought about 100 girls on how to code and also other 5,000 kids on the basics of these emerging technologies.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any questions from the floor? If not, let me ask you, John, if you had, say, $50 million, what would you do with that money?
I'd ask for 100 immediately. I would start a matching campaign because people love matching campaigns. So I try to leverage that 50 to get another 50. No, look, I think that, I mean, it's clear. I think it's clear what I would do. I would just keep scaling up what we're already doing because it works. It's without trying to sound arrogant, but we have a very generous commitment from the Gates Foundation. Melinda was my first boss at Microsoft, thank God. And they've generously underwritten a system of research, monitoring, and evaluation because Melinda said to me, unless you can prove the efficacy of what you do, then there's no sense scaling it up, right? There's no sense scaling a bad program. The problem in I think the philanthropy sector is quite often we either keep things very, very small. 90% of all NGOs that are based in the United States operate in budgets of less than $500,000 a year. There's not too few NGOs. There's just too few NGOs that have scaled. And I think scaling comes with business thinking. So the first thing I would do basically is try to figure out and ask our teams on the ground, what could you do with this money? Don't have me decide from the ivory tower, but go to our country director in Sri Lanka, who's a woman, go to our country director in Vietnam, who's a woman, and say, what do you think you could do with the additional funding? I'm very proud, I will say very briefly that at Room to Read, we are walking the walk on women's empowerment. 52% we have 1,400 employees worldwide, 52% are women. 49% of the managers at Room to Read are women. Our CEO, I was a first generation CEO, our second generation CEO is a woman. 4 of her 6 direct reports are women, and 60% of our 10,000 plus fundraising volunteers are women. And that's part of the secret to our success. A lot of companies have women in leadership initiatives. We've done something radically different at Room to Read. We simply have women in leadership.
Let me ask you something else, John. When you go to private sector...
I practiced that line in the mirror this morning while I was shaving. Sorry.
Have you ever had a private sector company say no to you?
Oh, yeah.
How can they do that? Don't they feel shameless? What do they say?
No, look, I think there's some companies that are already doing good things. So once upon a time, we approached Standard Chartered, and I got a meeting with Peter Sands, and he was very respectful, but he also said, we're doing Seeing is Believing, and that's our thing, and we're going to scale the hell out of Seeing is Believing. And I was like, great, good for you, because at least you're committed to something, and that something is something that you can scale. We do hope to work with more companies. I'll throw it out there that we have half of our seed funding to launch in Myanmar as our 15th country. I'm looking for the other half, so if your country's investing in Myanmar, please talk to us if you want to get involved and be like Vicky and Brad from Tatcha. We're always looking for, I'm sure everybody, including Kamal, we're always looking for more support from the corporate community. What we've done is we've made a pledge as an NGO that when we work with companies, we will be radically transparent in terms of what we present to you. We're not going to try to BS our way through anything. We'll be completely transparent with our financials. We will be very, very good at working with companies to figure out how we can help them solve business problems. So in terms of using purpose to recruit millennials, we can help with that. Using purpose to motivate.
I'm going to cut you off right now because we only have...
I'll give me 10 seconds to land the plane. Fine. But working with companies to say that it's not just a one-off transaction where the company's giving us funding and we're deploying it. We're trying to then also use purpose as a way to help companies with recruiting, motivation, customer connections, et cetera, so that we are actually at the intersection of purpose and profitability. That, to me, is the key.
Final question for you in the 1 minute and 6 seconds we have remaining. You have done so much. Everyone talks about you cannot be afraid to fail. Better to fail quickly than slowly. Have you ever failed at anything?
Yes.
And tell us when and why in the 49 seconds remaining.
Okay. Well, you know, first of all, I think for me, it's very, very important to stick to my values. And my values are very simple, but it's not always easy to achieve. And where I have failed is that if I have invested with people or in a project that originally I thought we share exactly the same values and it happened to be not. So if I was giving $50 million, I would have thought I would go to a lot of people that I have known in the past perhaps 10 years, and I would sit with them, and first I would check if we share the same values, and then I would put it to test. When I think they have actually passed the test, then collectively we will come up with an idea of what to do with that 50, and then hopefully get even 150 more. But you know, really talking to leading women who have the same value and can help achieve what we collectively feel like has to happen.
Thank you so much. It's one of these rare panels where you feel so much more optimistic about the world than pessimistic. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.